What's up, guys? Jason up in the New 80s Revolution, back down here in the Nerd Cave, surrounded by the goodies, the 80s relics that you and I love so much. And tonight, we're talking LJNs again. A few months ago, I came on here and promised a few LJN or a few more LJN related videos. And that's about when I introduced this little thing called Play Action Championship Wrestling, which, we put up a quick put up a teaser. We put up an intro that was done by a friend of mine, a very talented friend of mine. And then I and my small amount of talent came down here and produced a little episode 1 for you, introducing the commentary team. And I believe it was announced that a battle royal will determine the first ever PACW champion. Well, that is coming very soon. But in between Play Action Championship Wrestling episodes, I just want to do, the regular videos that you know me for and that originated on this channel. So we're going to be talking LJNs again tonight. But first, as I always do, just a couple of notes. Subscribers continue to grow. That's awesome. I think we're up around, I think it's 1,160 or so. That's pretty cool. Looks like 1,200 will be the next milestone that we'll reach. Continue enjoying speaking to you guys on Facebook and Messenger and Instagram and all that fun stuff. So as always, thank you for continuing to watch my stuff. What else? I don't know, just stuff that I haven't updated you guys on lately. It's Christmas season here in the Nup House, and the tree and all the decorations went up starting Halloween night, which some may feel is insane, and it probably is, but with 2 small children, it's tough to watch the Christmas the Christmas crash after the build of December, and then it seems like once that last present is open, the crash comes and the children are deflated and I'm deflated. So we thought let's extend it as long as we can, and so we figured 11:15 p.m. on Halloween night would be a good time to set up the tree, and we did. And so we are ushering in the Christmas season. We are all pumped about that. Hopefully, well, I know I'll have some 80s toy goodness to show you and share with you on when I do my Christmas pickups video. So we've got that coming. We've got more Play Action Championship Wrestling videos coming. I have begun a new collection. The Ghostbusters line is complete to my liking. And so I will probably get a video up soon that's pretty much a review of the entire Real Ghostbusters figures collection. But I have also just started the Coleco Rambo line. And a good friend of mine on here, Devin Cutmore, who you've certainly seen in the comments, sent me a belated birthday package, and he helped the Rambo collection along nicely. And just as the Ghostbusters, just as I did with Ghostbusters, I'm picking them up frequently. So I just grabbed I think it's General Warhawk. I'm not super familiar with all the names yet, but General Warhawk is on the way, I believe, and we've got a couple of Rambo variants up there, and it's a cool line. It's a really detailed line, and it's small, and hopefully we'll be able to grab some. There are some expensive figures. There are some fairly rare figures, especially from Series 2. There were only 2 series, and half of the figures in Series 2 are very expensive and difficult to find. So we'll see where we go with that. And it's got a pretty awesome, the Rambo line has a pretty awesome play set as well, which is huge. So a nice, big, colorful, artistic box. I will hopefully add soon. So that's that. That's what I'm working on now. And like I said, tonight we're going to talk LJNs again, as always, or as you are most used to. Popular topic on this channel, obviously. So tonight I wanted to do the top 10, like a top 10 list, okay? But when it comes to LJNs, what exactly are we talking about? What do I mean by top 10? Do I mean the top 10 best looking figures, the top 10 most realistic figures? Lots and lots of options as far as talking about a top 10 list. But what I wanted to do, since we're in the in season 1 of Play Action Championship Wrestling, I felt it would only be natural to talk about the top 10 figures I used as a kid. I guess we would have to say that they were my favorite figures because they were the ones that I would use often. So tonight we'll talk about the top 10 figures that I used as a kid. These were the go-to figures. These were the characters that, maybe held the most titles in my childhood LJN Wrestling Federation. The ones most used. And there are probably multiple reasons why they were the most used. It could be their pose was great. It could be the way they looked. It could be how hot they were in real wrestling at the time. Remember, we're kids, right? We're 8, 9, 10 years old, so it would be only natural for us to want to use the guys that are most, exposed on TV. So I'm sure that played a role in it as well. So we'll go over that. We'll go over the top 10 LJN Wrestling Superstars figures that I used as a kid, and that will probably carry over into PACW. I mean, there's probably a really good chance that you see me going to these figures as well. Modern day, as I get down here and do the PACW thing, you're probably going to see a lot of these guys that I'm about to talk about tonight being used in Play Action Championship Wrestling. So, with that being said, tonight's top 10 is my favorite LJN Wrestling Superstars figures used as a kid. But first, as is tradition, commercials. I like to throw in some commercials, and if we're talking about LJNs, we need to see some of those classic LJN commercials. I got a couple for them. I got a couple for you right now. Check these out. I'll be right back.
With Ruffling Superstar, it's like having a real match right in your own home. Yes, there's Jimmy Superfly Snuka, the Iron Sheik, Hogan, and Big John Studd. And now you can fly them and flip them in the Swing 'em Wrestling Ring.
Big match at my house. I'll bring my guys. You have yours. I've got Junkyard Dog.
It's World Wrestling Federation Superstars.
I've got Brutus Beefcake. Here's George the Animal Steel. I've got Great Hammer Valentine. Ricky the Dragon Steel.
They're so real.
And Rowdy Rock Piper.
Can you tell the difference? Wrestling Superstars, they're for real. Each sold separately from LJN.
I just love seeing those commercials, guys. Those things never get old. And imagine what it was like for a kid. Well, of course you can imagine. You were there. You lived it. Remember what it was like to have that commercial show up on your TV on Saturday morning while you were watching your WWF wrestling. We are so excited when that commercial aired. I remember being a kid, and before you could quickly go to the VCR and record a commercial, I would hold up my audio cassette recorder up to the TV, and I would record the audio of those LJN commercials, the bring home all the action song was played over and over again on my little mini Fisher-Price boombox or whatever it was I had at the time. Great stuff, you know. Waiting for those commercials to come on was just as good as the wrestling action itself. So if you're a fan of this channel, and you are certainly well aware of how important these LJN figures were to me as a kid. And I know I've talked about it in the past, but I can't emphasize how much I played with these figures, how big of a role these figures played in my childhood. As I've said before, no other toy had a chance to survive in my world as a kid. The LJN wrestlers, and the Remco figures and the other figures that were out at the time, wrestling figures, dominated my playtime. As I've said before, I had a few GI Joes, I had a few Matchbox cars, I had a few, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, whatever. I would get them because it seemed customary for every kid, in that time period to have some of these different toy lines. So I would have them, and they'd be nice, but they never survived. They would always be overruled by the LJN figures. So, I played with these guys daily. The LJN figures, whether it was before school, whether it was after school, whether it was all summer, whether it was if I was going over a friend's house and spending the night or spending the day, the LJN figures would come with me and we'd play there. There were certainly times when I would, chose to be by myself and not even go outside and play with other kids because I wanted to, continue playing with the LJN. So, why am I still talking about it at 42? Well, because they were, they played a huge role in my life as a kid. I would have, basically a federation. I had my own wrestling league. I had good guys, I had bad guys, and I had championship titles and championship reigns, and I would create cards, matches. I would write down matches that I would play out. And of course, every so often I'd have a super card, a WrestleMania or something like that I would play out. And, as good as an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old could do, I would create storylines, and I would have, before I knew what storylines were, I would have good guys turning bad and bad guys turning good, and partners turning on each other, and, all sorts of pretty cool stuff. And I did this right from the beginning. As soon as I had enough figures to, to create a league, I was at it, and it was ongoing. I would always, I wouldn't change it up. I wouldn't, rewrite the past or forget the past. It was ongoing, and I pretty much played it out from 8, 9 years old, and honestly up to about 14 or 15. I was still consistently playing with these figures, and keeping the stories going. It was awesome. So I never, with however many they made, 65 or so, 62. You certainly couldn't include everybody, and I never had an entire collection as a kid, so only later did I get the more difficult figures like the Big Boss Man and Ultimate Warrior, the Black Card series. Way later in my collection, pretty much past my playing prime, did I get the 1989 figures. I still played a little bit, but they definitely were not part of the height of my play. So I would certainly try to use as many figures as I had, but I would obviously exclude some figures that had horrible poses, or some figures that I just couldn't figure out what to do with. Not to give away any of my bottom 10 figures, but George the Animal Steel was certainly in that bottom 10. I never used that figure. I guess I didn't know what to do with them, or, I don't know. So I never used the George Steel figure. But I will keep that for the next episode. But as I mentioned earlier, I certainly had go-to figures, figures that I would use all the time, figures that were a part of, the ongoing storylines. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So without further ado, let's talk about my top 10 LJN figures, the figures that I played with the most as a kid back in the glorious 80s. All right, first up, let's go with, these are in really no particular order. I really can't say that I have a number one favorite go-to figure, so these are all equal. First up, the Ricky the Dragon Steamboat figure. You can obviously see here. This figure, again, was a part of many stories, mainly around the Randy Savage Ricky Steamboat feud that was going on in real life. A lot of times that carried over into the LJN world, and Ricky Steamboat had a pretty long ongoing feud with Randy Savage. I certainly can't remember all of the details of championships, but Ricky Steamboat was a multiple-time intercontinental champion in my federation. And I have to assume that I let him have a run with the world title a time or two. But Ricky Steamboat is definitely in the top 10 figures most used. Again, play pose is good for LJNs. You can, for me, as long as somebody had a punchable hand, so like this hand would do the majority of the action, you'd get some play. If both arms were down and you could only throw shoulder blocks or something, there was a good chance you didn't get a lot of play. But Ricky Steamboat, definitely in my top 10 most played with LJNs back in the day. We mentioned Randy Savage, so let's put him up there as well. This is just one of the better LJN figures. If we were going to do just a top 10 of, best looking or most, figure that most captures the likeness, he's definitely on there. This is a great figure, and a great character. I mean, Randy Savage has to be right up there with some of the most influential or most important characters of a particular era. And Randy Savage coming in to the WWF in late 85, mid 85, you knew that you were going to get some fantastic matches with him and Hogan. And from what I recall, the matches between Hogan and Savage were, in real life, were actually some of Hogan's best performances, because you couldn't have a bad match with Randy Savage. And so, of course, that carried over to the LJN line, and I used the heck out of Randy Savage, who was involved in a lot of play, a lot of stories, multiple-time champion, world champion, intercontinental champion in my federation, good guy, bad guy, team with Hogan, turn on Hogan, all kinds of fun stuff with Randy Savage. I'm sure I, did some storylines with Elizabeth back in the day too, did Elizabeth ever turn on the Macho Man back in the day? Absolutely. And so Randy Savage also up there in that top 10 list. And I'm pretty sure so far Steamboat and Savage are going to get some action, some play in PACW. They're probably going to both play major roles. So stay tuned for that. Randy Savage, number 9, I guess we could say, or one of the top 10. might seem surprised by this one, but Greg Valentine was used a great deal in my childhood. Fantastic pose, great play pose, bulk, height. The height's a little off. Greg Valentine is one of the tallest LJN figures when he really shouldn't be, but other than that, it's a pretty close to perfect figure. You've got this great punching arm. Of course, the hammer would drop those famous elbows. You've got this arm for punching. You've got a clothesline arm. You got a bulky figure. This is a great, great figure. And again, often used in my federation. He did team with Brutus Beefcake for some time in my league. Multiple time Intercontinental Champion. We've got feuds with Tito Santana. We've got feuds with Ricky Steamboat. I don't think I ever turned the Hammer good. I'm pretty sure he was a bad guy straight through. But, Greg the Hammer Valentine, often used, one of my top 10 favorites. We're going to put these guys at... I've got a couple of tag teams on this list, and I'm counting them as one guy. So, Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkoff, very often used as a tag team in my childhood. Sheik was definitely used a lot as a singles wrestler, but I would, if I can remember, I would use them more as a tag team. This was a go-to bad guy tag team for me. So if the British Bulldogs needed somebody to fight, if the Killer Bees needed somebody to fight, I remember having some bad guy versus bad guy matches with the Dream Team, Valentine and Beefcake, taking on Sheik and Volkoff. This team was always accompanied by Freddie Blassie, of course, and they did hold my LJN Tag Team Championships multiple times. And again, Sheik would go off and do some single stuff. Nikolai would too, but Nikolai I would kind of use him as the, not a jobber necessarily, but, an easily beatable bad guy. So when I wanted to have a good guy really, go over impressively, he would take on Nikolai Volkoff. But as a tag team, these guys had their run in the old LJN Championship Wrestling League. Along the same lines, this was my favorite go-to tag team. As a kid, I loved playing with the British Bulldogs. In fact, you can see them here with the titles on, the tag team titles. No, that is not this is not current time. This is not modern day. The British Bulldogs are not the current PACW tag team champions, but these are just their display belts. Size is way, way off with these guys. Dynamite Kid is a tiny figure. Actually, they're both pretty small. Davey Boy's a little taller than Dynamite, but Dynamite Kid is one of the smallest LJNs. And so, he really... and I guess that could be more true to scale, but this was my go-to good guy tag team in my LJN federation. And in fact, I've got the only original figures that I have from childhood, I have a copy of the British Bulldogs. They're destroyed. I had a pet rat as a kid, and apparently the pet rat got out one day, and my figures were on the floor, and the pet rat chewed the figures. So I have my original British Bulldogs with chewed up hands and chewed up feet and chewed up faces. Because my killer rat went nuts one day and killed the British Bulldogs. But these are really crisp and clean. These are in very nice shape, actually. These don't even look played with. They will be. You will see the British Bulldogs in the PACW, that's for sure. But use these guys all the time as kid. King Kong Bundy. You could do a lot of things with King Kong Bundy because he's a difficult to defeat bad guy. Okay, so he could really beat up on the good guys like Hillbilly Jim, Junkyard Dog. Who else? Who else would I throw in as a victim You know, guys like Corporal Kirshner, when I actually used him as good guy Corporal Kirshner, we'll get to that in a minute. You know, Coco Beware, guys like that. King Kong Bundy could come in and just take some of their offense, but really just, you know, crush them. But then on the other hand, he could give a nice even matchup to a good guy that I wanted to win, like Ricky Steamboat or Hulk Hogan. They could really get their money's worth from King Kong Bundy, but ultimately sneak out a win at the end. So that's why I liked using him a lot, because again, he could crush the good guys that I wanted him to defeat, and he could put up a good fight against the good guys that I wanted him to lose to. So that made him a very usable figure. And even though I mentioned earlier about the lack of a punching pose, I never had any problems playing with this figure or enjoying, you know, playing with this figure, because, you know, I could easily, I just gave one away. I could easily just kind of, you know, that was my punch. You know, you could see the punch going on there. So it was easy enough to play with Bundy and have a lot of fun with him. So he's definitely on the list. I gave one away, so I may as well show you what I gave away. But I included all three of these figures in this list. And you might be thinking, what is this combination? Who are these guys? Well, SD Jones, who I never used as SD Jones. I renamed SD Jones Brickhouse Brown, who was a WCCW mid-card Texas wrestler from like mid-80s, you know, 87 or so. Brickhouse Brown. Saw him on ESPN one day, thought that was a cool name. Don Morocco, who I rarely used as Don Morocco. This figure, despite the magnificent Morocco on his t-shirt, this figure was Mike Rotundo from, you know, early WWF fame, teaming with Barry Windham. Obviously went on to become IRS in the later days of the WWF in the 90s, or late 80s, early 90s. Maybe it was just early 90s. So Mike Rotundo, Brickhouse Brown, and Corporal Kirshner. Now, for some reason, the Corporal Kirshner name just screamed good guy. So I had to rename him and just call him by his first name, Mike Kirshner. So we've got Mike Kirshner, Mike Rotundo, and Brickhouse Brown. And these guys were a faction. No name, I didn't name them, but these three guys wrestled together. So oftentimes I would pair them up, you know, and they would hold the tag team titles. Whether it was Rotundo and Brown or Rotundo and Kirshner, these guys were multiple time tag team champions. I'm sure I messed around with a 6-man title back in the day at some point, and I'm sure these guys were 6-man tag team champions, but as singles guys, they could win or lose. As a tag team, they were tag team champions, but could also lose. And they always traveled together. So if Rotundo was wrestling, Brickhouse Brown was in the corner and, of course, interfering. But I don't know why. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what made it make sense to me. But as a kid, and, you know, even today, these three guys belong together. Don't have a clue why, but I use them all the time back when I was a kid. Now, are you wondering if Brickhouse Brown and Mike Rotundo are going to make their way to PACW? Probably not initially, and maybe not at all. When we do the PACW, Mike Rotundo will be Don Morocco. SD Jones might be your jobber of choice. Corporal Kirshner may or may not even exist in PACW, who knows? But this faction, this 6-man tag team, was often used back in the day. All right, moving along. I mean, how could you be a kid in the 80s and have some LJN figures and not have the Hulkster on your top 10 list? I mean, of course, I would be lying if I said that I was not a big Hulkamaniac as a kid. And yes, of course, the Hulk was always the go-to champion of my federation. He certainly lost the title from time to time, but always seemed to win it back. And it's the first LJN figure. I mean, I'm sure that they made them all at the same time. But to me, this is the first ever LJN figure. This is Hulk Hogan, and it's in probably the best LJN pose there is. It's iconic. I mean, this is an iconic image. This just screams childhood. This thing right here. LJN fans have seen it on TV. We've seen it in old TV shows. We've seen it in modern TV shows. The Goldbergs. There's a Hulk Hogan sitting on the desk. This is just a classic, and of course I used the Hulkster a great deal as a child. We talked about King Kong Bundy being the guy that he was a great bad guy. He could really beat up good guys that I wanted him to beat up. He could lose to good guys that I wanted him to lose to, but put on a pretty good show. And I wanted to pick a good guy who I used that same formula with, and I went with the Junkyard Dog. So again, Junkyard Dog, fantastic pose. I mean, as close to the original Hogan pose, I guess, as you could get, but great pose, great looking figure, just solid figure all the way around. But with the Bundy formula, he could basically, he could beat up bad guys. He could go over bad guys that I wanted him to, like Cowboy Bob Orton, or like Adrian Adonis. He could convincingly beat those guys. Or he would be a good challenge for a bad guy that I wanted to win, like a King Kong Bundy, or maybe even Andre the Giant, when Andre the Giant turned bad in my federation. Of course he's got to have somebody to beat up, and he's got to make a statement, but the dog isn't just going to lay down for him. I mean, he puts up a good offense, but eventually loses. Junkyard Dog, for that reason, was a go-to figure of mine. So JYD on the list. Wrapping it up with these next ones, Tito Santana. Absolutely used Tito Santana a lot as a kid. He was really involved with a lot of the wrestling that I am so fond of, the early 80s WWF. I mean, Tito Santana and Greg Valentine had one of the greatest feuds of all time. And that was the feud that was going on when I tuned in for the first time to WWF wrestling. Greg Valentine and Tito Santana were battling it out for the Intercontinental title. Tito Santana trying to get revenge on the Hammer for breaking his ankle, dropping the Intercontinental title to Valentine, winning it back from Valentine, and then ultimately losing it to Randy Savage, and then kind of starting the down, the decline, I suppose, of Tito Santana. But this figure has has a lot of fond memories for me. He was involved in a lot of play, got a lot of runs with the Intercontinental title. I'm pretty sure he was a tag team champion with somebody back in the day. But again, because this was Tito Santana was one of my earliest memories of actually watching wrestling. Of course, he's got to get some love in my old federation. So, Tito Santana, top 10 most used figure. And this final one, a tag team. A tag team that I put together as a kid. Terry Funk and Cowboy Bob Orton. As a singles, Bob Orton never really got much action. But as a tag team wrestler teaming with Terry Funk, these guys, in addition to the Bulldogs and Sheik and Volkoff, were my go-to tag team. They had multiple runs with the title, and I used the heck out of them. This was a very dominant tag team in my play, and will be making their way to PACW. You will see this tag team in PACW. In fact, as a kid, I named these guys. This was the Wild Desperados, Terry Funk and Cowboy Bob Orton, the Wild Desperados. And believe it or not, they were managed by Mr. Fuji, which maybe it doesn't make sense, but Mr. Fuji was their manager. Now, Terry Funk got a ton of play as a singles wrestler. In fact, Terry Funk defeated Hulk Hogan to win the WWF title in my childhood. I don't know why I just considered him a dominant character. His fantastic pose and actually a really great looking figure. I mean, this is one of, again, if we were doing that top 10 list of the way, the best looking figures, Terry Funk would definitely be in like the top 5. I just loved this figure, the branding iron, the hat, the chaps. This is a great figure. And Terry Funk didn't stick around all that long in the WWF, but I used the heck out of him as a tag team wrestler and as a singles wrestler. You are looking at the man to dethrone Hulk Hogan back in the day. Will he have some action in PACW? I mean, you have to think that he'll have singles action and tag team action. All right, guys, so that is the top 10 LJN figures I used as a kid. Let's throw you some more commercials, and we'll come back to wrap this thing up in a minute. I'll be right back.
Are you ready for Hulkamania? Ancient Adonis, looking good and tough to beat. Nobody beats Macho Man.
You can get right in the action in the ring with Wrestling Superstars figures. The big names are here and they're ready. It's corner-to-corner excitement. Match your moves against the other guy. Have your own WrestleMania with all your favorite figures. Because you're in the ring with the WWF Wrestling Superstars figures. Figures, ring and cage sold separately. Assembly required. It's a grand toy.
I can beat anyone.
What'd you say, boy?
All right, guys, so that is that. My feet fell asleep sitting down there, so I had to get up and stretch a little bit. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for watching the LJN Top 10 Figures of My Youth. The figures I used the most. If you agree or disagree or had a top 10 list of your own, you know what to do. Talk about it. That's what we do best on this channel. We talk about stuff. We compare memories. Coming up next on the channel, PACW. We're definitely getting that battle royal going. You will have the first ever PACW champion crowned soon. The feedback for PACW has been awesome. I am not surprised. I'm not surprised by you guys. I'm surprised that what I put out is of any value to you, but I'm not surprised about your comments. You guys have always been supportive and have enjoyed my content no matter what it is. And so I remain thankful for that, because again, if you guys didn't like it, if you were tired of me, I would go away and this YouTube thing would be over. But because you continue to subscribe, you continue to watch the videos, you continue to leave awesome comments, I continue to produce. So thank you. Just a couple things real quick. Go check out the Instagram channel, the New 80s Revolution on Instagram. Like the Facebook. Come hang out with us on Facebook, New 80s Revolution. TeePublic, if you're still into the t-shirts. I haven't sold a t-shirt in about 2 months, but that's okay. If you want a t-shirt of the PACW logo, let me know, and I'll make it available on TeePublic. There's some LJN t-shirts over there. There's my logo. There's the New 80s Revolution logo. If you want to get that, go check it out. If not, it's okay. I don't care. I only get like $4 per t-shirt, so it doesn't matter. I basically started the TeePublic account so that I could wear my own, merchandise, which is maybe pathetic. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Check out this. If Bobby Campbell is watching, this one's for you, man. Thank you very much. That's that, guys. Top 10 list is in the books. PACW will be back soon. You will see a new episode of that coming up very shortly. You will see the Battle Royal that you have all been waiting for. And with that, the New 80s Revolution is signing off. We will see you all soon. New videos coming. Thanks, as always, for hanging out with me. I will talk to you soon. Good night now.